So I've been traveling for the past 3 years, and I've learned so many things through traveling that I wish other people or I wish I knew before I left. So I'm making this video series on everything I wish I knew before I start traveling. I was originally going to do it as one video, but I just filmed the first one and it took 20 minutes. So we're going to separate it. There's going to be before you go, which if you would like to know, please keep watching. And then I'll have packing and once you're there. So I'm separating it into 3 different videos. If you are traveling at all in the future, I really suggest you watch all 3 videos. I really wish I knew these things before I started traveling. It's completely changed my experience. It's made everything less dramatic. It's just set me up for success, basically. So if you have any trips, if it's your first trip or your 100th trip, I really recommend watching this video series because these are tips that really could change your life while traveling. So if you would like to know how to kind of plan ahead before you go, everything you should know or do before you start traveling, please watch this video. And then I'm going to post another one on packing and once you're there. Thanks, guys. Welcome back to my channel. I just thought I'd make this video today about all of the tips that I wish someone told me before I started traveling. So I've traveled to 9 countries in the past, I think, 3 years. I've been to Canada, England, Ireland, Scotland, the Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, Indonesia. So I feel that I've gotten a little bit better at traveling as the years have gone on. I started traveling by myself. I went on a trip to England, Ireland, Scotland, and the Netherlands. I was there for, I think, 2 months. It was either 2 or 3 months. I think it was 2 months. And I spent my time traveling alone. It was my first time even really traveling outside of the country. But I went alone and I had like some friends meet up with me for, like a week here or so. But I was really alone for the most part. And that trip, I learned so much on what not to do when traveling that my other trips after that, Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, Indonesia, they went so much smoother. And even from going to those other trips, I've learned things. Just every time I travel, I learn like new things that I really wish I knew when I was packing or before I went or when I was making my travel plans. So I just thought I'd make this video to kind of tell you guys all the tips that I wish I knew or that I wish someone told me before I started traveling. Hopefully this will have you more prepared for your next trip, or maybe it's your first trip. Traveling is really great because I'm American and I feel like traveling is like essential to understanding the world. If people don't travel, they only see things through like an American scope of view or American vision. But once you start traveling, you have like just a better idea of the world that we live in, and it's just really fun. So I promote that everyone starts traveling, and I hope that these tips get you more prepared for your first trip or your next trip, or whether this is your first trip or your 100th trip. I think that these tips are something that can help everyone. So I separated it into 3 different sections. There's before you go, packing, which is also before you go, but a whole different can of worms, and then once you're there. So we're just going to get started with before you go. So I wrote down a big list of everything I wish I knew. So we're just going to go through this one by one about all the things that can make your traveling experience go so much smoother, and so that you're prepared, that you feel comfortable, that you've taken those steps that are going to set you up for success. So before you go, you should research. If you want to travel somewhere that you've never been before, that's incredible, but you should have an idea of what that's going to be like. So you should research the laws. That's really important because there's so many laws that you don't know, especially if you're American. I feel like our laws are very, I don't know, unique, and other countries are very unique, and there's just different laws. Here's an example, like I went to school in Boston where jaywalking is the norm. If you're not jaywalking, you're probably late. So jaywalking is totally normal in Boston. Everyone just crosses the street if there's not a car coming, whether the traffic light's going or not. In other countries, you're at fault if you get hit by a car if you're jaywalking. Like in other countries, you can get written up for jaywalking. It can be seen as a much more offendable offense. So just like get familiar with the laws. There's probably like a Wikipedia page about the country you're going to, or even if that country has like a specific government organized, I don't know, website, that's going to help you even better. just look up like laws that Americans should know when traveling to Scotland, or common laws in Scotland that travelers should know. Just anything that's going to help you basically set yourself up for success. Like, I almost got in a lot of trouble once because I crossed a subway, like basically jaywalked across tracks at a subway station, but it wasn't even like a subway station. It was in Australia, and it was like very casual, like almost on the street. But I got yelled at pretty severely and threatened that I would get ticketed, or like I could lose my visa. Like, just basically like be prepared for the laws that are in those countries. And if you're someone who does party drugs, I don't, but if you're someone who does drugs, and that's important to your traveling experience, I'm not judging you, but you should definitely check the laws on those drugs. So, like, some countries in Asia, you can go to jail for your whole life for having like a gram of pot. So, laws for drugs really differentiate between the countries. In Portugal, every single drug is decriminalized. Like, it's just good to know these things before you find yourself in a legal situation that you don't want to be in. I saw a sign once when I was in Thailand. Where was I? I was at Koh Phi Phi, this island off of Thailand, and it said, "Don't be a dumb c word and do drugs in it." No, don't be a dumb c word and do illegal drugs in a foreign country. And I feel that way, that it's smart to personally not experiment with drugs while you're abroad. But for some people, that's really important to them, and it can be legal in some states. So you should definitely do your research on drug laws before you start traveling, and before you take that tab of acid, or before you start doing drugs in that country. Just set yourself up for success and research before you go. Um, so another thing you should research before you go, besides drugs and laws about drugs, and drugs and laws, is visas. Your visa is the only way you're going to get into that country. So some countries, if you're only traveling there for say 2 months, you don't need a visa. Some countries you need a visa. The visa process is different for every country, and it can take a long time to obtain your visa. I made that mistake because I was studying abroad in Australia, and I kind of just like overlooked the visa process, and it turned out that like something I filled out was wrong, and then I wasn't gonna get my visa, and I wasn't gonna be able to go in time. So I was like on the phone for so long trying to figure it out, and it's so stressful. So the first thing you should do when you decide this is the place I'm gonna go to is look up the visa process for how long you're planning on going there. It can really screw you up if you mess up your visa when you're in a country and like overstay your visa. I think that can make certain countries for you never to be allowed back in there again. So really like set yourself up for success. Look up the visa information, apply for your visa correctly, do everything the best to your knowledge, don't half-ass it. Your visa is literally the only thing that's going to get you in the doors of that country for some countries. So your visa should be priority numero uno. So besides laws, drugs, visas, you should also research expectations. Just, you can even find YouTube videos, or you can find web articles like American travels to Scotland. What are the expectations? Or what to expect when traveling to Scotland? Or I'm just using Scotland as my example in this one, but you should really research kind of like what the expectations are. Maybe you have an idea of what a country's like, but it's really not that way. So maybe you don't want to go there, or maybe it's even better that it's not that way. You really want to like look up to date expectations of that country or of that city or of that area before you get there, so you can have some expectations, but you also don't want to overwhelm yourself with expectations of watching all these amazing vlogs and being like, my trip is going to be just like this person's. It's going to be different for everyone. Everything's different for everyone. So don't have super high like expectations, but just know what you're getting into or what you're going into. Um, Another thing you should definitely research before you go is apps. So if you have an iPhone, an Android, a smartphone, you're going to have different apps. Getting those apps before you go could actually help, because say that you are traveling somewhere and they have trains is like a common source of transportation. Well, say that your Wi-Fi is like acting up and you don't get to get that app once you're there and you don't know how to get from one place to another. It's just best to look up like 20 must-have apps for travelers in Scotland, or 20 apps popular in Scotland, or something like that, because you want to have those like transportation apps. Some countries use different things other than Ubers. You want to have those apps to set yourself up for success. You don't want to. The thing is that phones are so temperamental when you're abroad. So that's the next thing I was going to talk about for researching is your phone, because every country has like different phone plans basically. If you don't have an basically you want to research your abroad plans and what your options are. I know that some companies work better in some countries than other countries. So I remember that T-Mobile worked really well for me in Australia, but I don't think that worked really well for me when I was in Scotland. So you might want to get a prepaid phone, you might want to buy a chip, you might want to pay a monthly fee, which is what I did. I forget what that company was called, but there's one that they sell at a lot of convenience stores. But you want to like get an idea of what your plan is going to be for your international minutes, because if you don't set it up, then you're probably gonna have to pay for it at the airport, which is going to be really expensive. Or like you just want to figure out what you're going to do with that. So you want to do all of your research first, and then the next thing you want to do is basically start to plan ahead, or plan if you're going to plan ahead or not. I know some people that just want to go somewhere and they don't want to have anything planned. They don't even want to have their hotels planned because they could want to go to a different part of that country. So some people consciously make the decision not to plan like a lot of things when they're traveling so that they have tons of open opportunities. But then for other people, maybe you're more of a planner, and maybe having that schedule will make you feel more comfortable for your trip. So personally, I think I like to plan ahead a little bit. I like to do like somewhere in between. I like to plan my Airbnbs and hostels so I know I have somewhere safe to stay that night, but then I like to keep days open with nothing planned so I can just go and look around that city. But some people really don't prefer to plan ahead. But I don't know. Planning ahead is something you should consider if you want to or if you don't want to while you're planning your trip, basically. So, like I said, I prefer to plan ahead for my where I'm staying and stuff. So, my next tip of advice, I guess, after all the research stuff, is that I personally think that Airbnbs and hostels are way better to stay in than hotels. Some people need a hotel. They're just like, I love the amenities. I just feel safe there, whatever your reason is. Some people love hotels, and that's awesome for you. But if you're traveling to another country, like if you're staying in hotels in America, that's one thing. But if you're traveling to another country, I just feel like you can absorb so much more of that country through staying at a hostel or an Airbnb. I primarily travel through Airbnbs. I've stayed in Airbnbs for months at a time. It ends up feeling sometimes more like a roommate situation. I've become friends with the Airbnb host. They've taken me like out to do things in that country. They've helped me out so much. Your Airbnb hosts honestly just want to help you for the most part. They want to get a good review and they want to make sure your experience is really awesome. I mean, you're a foreigner in their country, so they're gonna like give you tips on, oh, eat here, do this, you must see this. And then same thing goes with your hostel. It's such a social opportunity because when you're staying in a hostel, it's basically like a summer camp for adults, is what I think of it as. Everyone's traveling from random countries, and everyone just kind of gets together in the main areas of those hostels, whether it's the bar or the living room or what, and they'll just start talking to each other. You can all go out drinking. They'll have events at hostels, like they'll have what are they called? They'll have bar crawls at hostels, and they'll have all these different things for you. So hostels are really awesome. I love hostels and Airbnbs. I guess it depends on where I'm going and what my expectations are on what I'm trying to do, like socially. Like if I'm trying to have more of like an I don't know, if I'm trying to like be alone more so on this trip, I'll maybe do an Airbnb. But if I'm trying to really like engage with everyone around me and try to like go to a lot of social things, I'll do a hostel. It also just depends on the ratings. You always want to check the ratings of hostels before you go. Some do have bed bugs. That's just something that happens to a lot of travelers. So you want to make sure that it's a very clean place, that you'll feel comfortable there. And if you're getting a hostel, get a lock. Bring a lock with you. I know that's part of the packing, but bring a lock, because your lock, they're gonna usually have lockers in the room for you to put your like valuable items in, and you can just lock that. You might even want to bring two locks. It just depends on how much stuff you have. But traveling in an Airbnb and hostel has completely elevated my travel experience. When I've gone places and I've traveled in just a hotel, it makes you feel like more of an outsider. Whereas if you're traveling in a hostel or an Airbnb, you just have that person there to give you tips, someone that like knows the area, not someone that's just working for a commercialized hotel that just cares about money. It's really more of a personal experience. And as I've said, I've like stayed in contact with some of my Airbnb hosts, and they're awesome people. And it's just completely changed my travel experience getting an Airbnb or a hostel as compared to a hotel. I really don't recommend people get hotels. I know some people really care about the cleanliness. They're like, I don't want to be in someone else's home. When you think about it, Airbnb is probably cleaner than most hotels. It depends on the person, but there's way more people staying in a hotel bed than there is in an Airbnb bed. So I know some people are like, oh, that's just like kind of weird. But when you think about it logistically, an Airbnb probably has less guests. I don't know. Um, so I personally always stay in Airbnbs or hostels, usually Airbnbs, but if there's a good hostel where I'm going, I'll definitely try to stay there or I'll do a mix of the two. So another tip of advice I have for you before you go is decide about. Oh, I already said that. So another personal tip I have for before you go is to check your visa status. Like I said, you should apply to your visa status when you first get it, but you need to check it regularly. Sometimes it'll say there was an issue with something, or it was unaccepted, or the payment didn't go through. You need to check it like, I don't know, every couple of weeks, or just check your visa application as often as you feel comfortable. Don't just apply to your visa and then never check it until the night before you go. Don't make the same mistake I made. Check your visa regularly, see if you got accepted, see what's going on. There's gonna be like, oh, this form wasn't put in correct, or something will be there. So check your visa regularly, and then also check your passport. Make sure that your passport is still going to be in date from when you start your trip to when you end your trip. Maybe it's valid now, but will it be valid in 6 months if you're going on a long trip? You should check, because passports usually take like 3 to 6 months to get back. So check that stuff as soon as you can. Another important thing to do before you leave is to alert your banks. And here's the thing, alert them 2 to 3 times. Do not just alert your bank once. You could have the same problem as my dad. We went to England and he alerted his bank, but I guess the person didn't do it or it didn't go through. So a card literally ate his machine. I mean, a machine literally ate his card. Like, we went to like the first convenience store. He put his card into this ATM and it just ate it. And he never got that card back. So it's really important to alert your banks 2 to 3 times, maybe even 4 times if you don't trust your bank. So you want to call them like a few days before your trip and tell them that you're traveling, where you're going. They're going to ask you the different places you're going. You can tell them you don't know if you don't know. Tell them the duration, tell them everything. And then you want to call back basically every day for a few days. Just be like, I just wanted to make sure, or you can tell them again, because mistakes happen. Maybe it didn't go through. Maybe they forgot to track it. Maybe something happened. And you don't want to be basically regretting that you didn't call your bank 3 times instead of 2 times when your card gets eaten at 2 in the morning outside a club. So basically, just like alert your banks and make sure that they know. Like, don't do it once. Always do it 2 or more times. So those are my tips for before you go. Oh, sorry, I forgot one. So another tip for before you go is to figure out the cash situation. So I would bring like, I don't know, maybe like 1,000 or I don't know, some amount of cash that you feel comfortable with, and I would put it in 2 different places. So put it, say, like in your main wallet that you always keep in your pocket, and then put it in like your checked suitcase in a specific purse. If you leave all of your cash in one place, you could easily lose it, and I've seen that happen to people, and it's devastating. So divide your cash up into at least 2 places, maybe even 5 if you really have like a good memory, or put a list in your phone of all the different 5 places you put it in. But divide your cash up, and then also a tip that I wish someone told me before I left is don't exchange all of your cash at the airport. Maybe even do just $20 for your taxi or something, but if you exchange all of your cash at the airport, you're going to be losing money. Everything is more expensive at the airport. If you go to a post office in the place that you're visiting, or usually post offices are good. Post offices are reliable for giving you as much of your money as you can get, but usually like airports have weird extra charges where it costs like extra to get your cash exchanged. So basically, you're always going to get more money if you exchange your cash at a post office as opposed to an airport. Airports always cost more for everything, so plan to not exchange your cash at airports, or even hit a post office where you live and then exchange some of it and then exchange the rest when you get there. So those are my tips for before you go, and this video actually ended up being very long, so I'm going to separate before you go, packing, and once you're there into 3 different videos. So please check out my packing and once you're there video. Thanks, guys.